This episode of This Agile Life has been brought to you by BrilliantAgile.com, providing Agile and Scrum training, consultancy, and personnel.
BrilliantAgile.com. Done right, it's brilliant.
Recorded on Wednesday, December 4th, 2013, in St. Louis, Missouri. This Agile Life, episode 28. The incentive is the freedom. Welcome to This Agile Life, a podcast about what it's like to be agile in the real world. Hello, everyone. I'm the host of This Agile Life, John Sextro. Joining me today, I have two wonderful co-hosts, Dr. Lee McCauley.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's going very great, Lee. How is it going for you?
It's going fantastic. I'm enjoying life.
That's wonderful, and I'm very happy to have you here on the show tonight.
Thanks, me too.
Lee, joining us tonight is Amos King.
I feel like I just saw you last night, John.
That's amazing. I feel the same way.
Having a great day today. It's always fantastic being a software developer. How about you, John? What are you doing today?
I wish I was a software developer some days. I'm busy coaching, being a coach.
Hey, we need those positions too.
Sometimes you just want to be the second baseman.
We're missing our architect.
We are missing Jason Tice. Sometimes we don't always need Jason. Not that we don't love Jason.
You mean we don't need an architect? We do need an agile coach, though.
I didn't say those things. Don't put words. Amos, don't put words in my mouth.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
That's what he gets for not being here.
Yeah, well, that's part of the penalty of not being on the show is you have to take extra abuse.
He's probably out doing agile Pilates or something.
One time we're going to have to get Lee and Jason on at the same time so we can talk about personal Kanban.
Yeah, I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
Well, that's not tonight. Tonight's topic is what is too big for an agile team? And I think we've all experienced this before, at least in varying levels and varying degrees. And the big question is, what's too big? And then if something does get too big, if a team or a project gets too big, what do you do about it?
Yeah, I'm gonna throw in the Tice answer. You should read Scaled Agile Framework because it has prescriptive guidance.
Oh my gosh!
Too big.
Oh my gosh! I think I just heard ice come out of your mouth, Amos. I could have channeled him in the same way, but you beat me to it.
So you want to give us some prescriptive guidance from SAFe, Amos?
No, I don't know enough about SAFe. I've never been safe in my life. I bareback agile. Oh, that's so wrong.
That is wrong.
We can just edit that out.
Or we can make it the show title. Well, so a team can be too big, but that's a very subjective thing. That's not just enough to say, oh, if it goes over 7 team members, it's too big, or if it goes over 9 team members or 15 team members, right? I mean, too big is like a feel. There's not an exact science or definition to it. It's like that old saying that I don't know how to define porn, but I know when I see it.
Right. So porn and barebacking, we're all over the place here.
Maybe we should start over.
I'm not real sure.
So I have to say that what I really would like to explore on this is not just whether there is such a thing as a team that's too big, but at what point, what are the things that too big of a team causes as far as pain in a team so that you start to say, okay, something is wrong. And is it really the size of the team, or is it something else that just seems to be exacerbated by the size of a team, and some people just get it confused with the size of a team? I don't know the answer to that, and I would love to hear what you guys have to think about.
I think as teams get larger, it gets a lot harder to make sure that you're communicating everything to everyone all the time. whenever you have a small team, 4 to 6 people who are working super tight and close every day, and they're pair switching and discussing all their moves along the way, there's a lot of communication that just organically happens. If you get a team of 30 people, it takes a lot longer before everyone on the team has seen everyone else on the team and had a good discussion with them outside of, unless you have meetings or things like that. So I think that is when the feel of a team being too big starts to happen, is when communication starts to break down. But I'm interested in how we can improve the communication so that size happens later. So instead of happening at, let's say, 8 people, it starts happening at 18 people or 30 people.
Right. I mean, I've noticed online the biggest complaint about having too big a team is that the stand-ups start lasting way too long, which I think is probably true, but is that more about the number of stories that you've got in flight? Yeah, just kind of curious.
Well, so Amos, when you were saying the communication gets harder to do, communication is harder to accomplish, that sort of dovetails with what Lee was saying about the stand-ups getting too long. Those both seem like similar symptoms, right? What are some other things that
I think one causes the other. If your stand-ups are going too long, then you start to get people checking out. It's are more likely to have that.
a long stand-up is a symptom of communication is becoming more difficult because you can't knock your stand-up out in less than 15 minutes. But I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about communication as a key indicator, what are some other manifestations of communication being too hard that you've experienced maybe on a team?
So stories start happening where, on a team of 6 where a story might be discussed and people understand, is things start to getting in the code that not everybody knows about, or stories are completed and then turned around and said, that is not anywhere near what we discussed in X meeting or stand up or whatever. So those things start to happen, is that features get put in or problems occur or happen on the team that not everybody is aware of.
If you pair switch a lot, it would seem like that could be a method, that could be an approach for trying to increase communication, is by forcing it by having people pair switch frequently. That would seem to prevent things from happening where, oh, I didn't know we were doing this. Well, if you pair switch and you're rotating around a lot through the team, you're less likely to experience that, don't you think?
So, well, you have a team of 40 people, right? So let's say you pair switch every hour and you have absolutely no meetings. It's all working on pairing. That's an entire week before you've worked with everyone on the team.
Yes.
And with meetings and people being tasked to do other things, because we know even whenever you're in an environment where it's 100% pairing, it doesn't really mean you're pairing 100% of the time, because you're doing other things. You're having discussions at the whiteboard. You're going to other meetings. You're talking to the boss or a future customer or whatever. So you don't actually get that. So it could be, if at a team of 40 people, if you're switching every hour, it'll be a good 2 weeks probably before you've worked with everybody. And that's only if you're diligent, that you're not working on the same thing and not working with the same people until you've gone through everybody.
Taking my hypothetical team of 40 people as an example, that 40 is to me way too big for a single group to be working on the same stuff all the time. That's just unwieldy. So this hypothetical group.
So why is that? Why is that, John?
Yeah.
I mean, why is it that you just kind of jump to that? I think I agree with you. I'm just trying to kind of playing devil's advocate of what is it about that team that says that's too big for all those people to be working on the same thing? Is it the communication, like Amos was saying, that those people just can't communicate enough? It just becomes too unwieldy and takes too much time. Is that really what the issue is?
I think there are multiple facets to it. I'll start with some technical reasons. And One is that it's incredibly difficult to have a group that size working on the same parts of a code base. So you have to figure some way out so that you can divvy things up, divvy the team up in a way that can allow a few people over here to focus on some stuff and to avoid humongous, hairy merge conflicts. But then there are communication problems. There's also problems with fractions occurring where certain people only talk to certain other people, and there's this clique sort of thing like in high school that starts to happen.
So you get cliquey silos of knowledge?
Yes, you do.
Like groups of 4 or 5 people who know one part of the thing, and then when one of them leaves your company, because it's normal, you have other ones start to follow them?
Yeah. What I would really like to do is not have a team that big if it's possible, because you're either going to have naturally occurring cliques or you're going to have planned and forced cliques that you implement by fracturing the team up into smaller teams so that the smaller teams can try to behave and act small, as opposed to having one humongous team of 30 or 40 or 50 people, using a feature team approach where you take individual teams and you treat them essentially, if you can imagine a team of, say, 7 people, and you might allow, let's say, 8 people for round numbers, and we'll pair them up. So we'll say 4 pairs are going to work on 4 features. You take a very large team and fracture them up into feature teams, and then those feature teams work on individual features as if they were an individual on a smaller team working on a feature. So you allow that very large group of people to behave and exhibit the behavior of a smaller team.
I think that's an interesting way to approach it. I would love to experience that, to see if it would work as well as it sounds like it might.
I don't know if you would love to experience it.
Okay.
I live it.
Fair point.
I live it, and it's not ideal, but it's better than some other options.
I think it gets harder the larger the team gets, for teams to come to agreements and compromises. That affects that communication ability and the ability of how to go. For a long time, I've said that in my experience, it's been that the number of people on a team that's how many retros or iterations that you have to have before that team really starts to gel. Because you start to get actual feedback at that point. I've heard other people talk about that and saying that they've noticed that. I don't know if there are any studies out there or anything on that, but so that if that is actually true, then that means if you have 40 people, you need to have 40 retros before people start to gel. And that if someone leaves and comes in, you've just extended it by another retro. So let's say you have a retro every week. That's 40 weeks. You're getting close to a year, right, before you can have a team start to gel there. And that makes it really difficult.
I'm not sure if I totally agree with that. Just because I'm not sure what your definition of gelling is. So what I found in some of my most recent projects is that we started up a greenfield project back in April, and we started with a team of about 6, and it was pretty much immediate that we had agreement as to what our daily habits were going to be and how our process was going to run, and as new people were added on a few months later, I mean, there was essentially no ramp up time from a team gelling from an idea of communication. So I'm not sure if that was a fluke or it just happened to be the personalities involved. But I can't say that it's a foregone conclusion that rule holds.
I guess my definition of gelling is that the team has started to recognize where their failures are and started to make improvements, and they're able to actively, I don't know, word judge themselves and find out where they need to go. So I think just because day one you have a plan and an agreement doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to be open and honest about changes. Like really day one, you can't say what you've done wrong in the past, right? It's good. Right. You have to have some past.
Unless, and this might be the case with Lee, and I'd like to ask him, did the people have any prior knowledge of each other's capabilities, skills, personalities, etc.?
Some, yes. So some of the people had worked on teams together. Not a lot, but a few. And different combinations. It wasn't just the same group. So I had worked with a couple of the other people. Those couple had worked with a couple others. So between the group, we had knowledge of each other, just not all together.
There's the whole storming, forming, norming, performing thing that goes on with teams, right? And it's certainly, I agree with what Amos said, and I think it's an interesting correlation that you made, Amos, between the number of members of a team and relating that to how long it takes, how many retros you have to go through before the team really starts to gel. And I would venture to say that hypothesis might be fairly accurate.
I started kind of recognizing that toward the beginning of 2008, and I started kind of tracking it on every team that I was on, not necessarily on paper, but just watching to see in retros when we started having big strides of improvement and people learning to communicate better. And it seems like about that retro, maybe one or two after or before, were like the sweet spot of, hey, now we've actually made real change. But, that's subjective on my part too. I'm the only one judging what real change is.
Communication. We talk so much about communication on this podcast, Amos, and you especially, but in this particular case, communication is maybe the key indicator to being too big. I can certainly testify to the fact that one of our number one topics at retrospectives on large teams is the problem with communication.
And Isn't that the number one topic on small teams too, usually?
Well, is it? Has that been your experience?
Until the team gels, yeah.
Until the team gels?
I would say that is kind of my key indicator of when a team is gelling.
There are actual physical barriers to communication on very large teams. It's extremely hard to sit a large team of people in close proximity to each other. And if you are able to do that, there's a great deal of noise that a large team of people create.
Especially if you're pairing.
That's true. And almost like regardless of if you're pairing or not, there's more chances for conversations to break out and ideas to come up and arguments to start. Whereas smaller groups, there's overall less. That
was also good until that arguments to start part came out. I thought, oh, you're getting that. This is all good stuff, right?
More personalities to conflict with.
So there's two sides of that coin, right? So you were saying lots of ideas coming out with lots of people, but then nobody can. If you got too many ideas, I find this with my Lego robotics team. Of course, that's a bunch of 10-year-olds, but they have all these great ideas, and nobody can decide on what idea is the best. Right. And so I see that sometimes in large teams as well, is that somebody's got an idea and somebody else has an idea, and they both are confident that their idea is the one. And there might even be a third or a fourth idea. And nobody is committal enough to say, yeah, that's the right idea, or really argue one side or the other. And in some cases, in the case of like a turnaround, the turnaround just keeps going until people just get tired and say, fine, whatever, or nothing gets decided, and it just kind of breaks up.
I'm going to name drop here. That's the Heath Porter's version of arguing.
Oh, really?
Just do it till everybody else gets tired.
I think, Lee, on a very large team, there's less of a desire or less of the potential for a person to put themselves forward and take ownership of making a decision, because there's more people to look around at and be like, oh, Amos will make that decision. Oh, Lee will make that decision. And I can just sit back and not make that decision. So I think when you're in a very large group, there's less incentive and less need for you to take ownership of something.
I like that you said ownership there. I think it is a lack of feeling like you are part of the project. You feel like such a much smaller percentage of the project that it's easy for you to sit back. And hey, almost all of us like to take the simple path. So the simple path is to sit back, shut up, and listen.
That's an interesting point, because I think that one of the keys to having a really well-functioning Agile team is that everybody has to take ownership and feel important in the process, and that in a lot of cases, when you have someone that, let's take another example that has the same result. If you have somebody that knows they're a short timer, right? They're only going to be on the project for 2 weeks or something like that. They don't really take ownership. They don't really buy into anything. And I think you're right, John. The same thing happens with a large team. And that can be, it's often just all the small things. There's no one silver bullet for a good Agile team. It's all these little things that by themselves, any one of them, nobody would think was important, but all of them together makes a big difference. And I think that's one of those things, that people feeling like they have ownership is one of those small things that makes a big difference.
Here's another thing I'd like to point out, and I'd like to tell you a brief story about a young John Sextro that was just starting out in IT in a small big company. It was like a subsidiary, a small branch of a large company in town here. And there was
John, let me get my blankie, my teddy bear.
Okay. I'll wait for you to get the blanket and teddy bear. Okay, and you're back. Okay, good. Great. So this was a small company. Everybody knew everybody, and there were departments. There was accounts receivable, there was accounts payable, there was IT. But there was a lot of people that knew a lot of the different parts of the business. And even in like IT, it was 5 or 6 guys and a couple of women. And there weren't sub-departments in IT. If you were a developer, sometimes you pulled network cable, sometimes you installed a phone, sometimes you set up somebody's network credentials, etc. And I think the bigger team, and that was great. And that was great for me, because that really allowed me to learn a whole bunch of stuff and allowed me to play different roles, do different things, learn about different parts of the business that I don't think I would have been able to do if I would have been a part of a very large corporate organization, because I would have a job and a job title and a cubicle and a small checklist of things that I was expected to do. And I'd be a very small cog in an enormously big machine. So if you scale that down to a rather large team, it's been my experience and observations that this happens to people on teams. Amos, you started to allude to the fact where people become experts in parts of the system, or maybe they become experts in certain technologies that are used in certain parts of the system. And then they become good at that stuff. And so people rely on them and depend on them. And then you get all of these fractures in the team where Joe only does this particular, or he knows only this particular aspect of something. And so he gets all of that work and nobody else steps up and takes that work on. And then people start to become comfortable with that and look for ways to get pigeonholed into things.
Well, and I believe that sometimes you get people that wouldn't normally be in that position getting into that position because they need to stand out in the team of 40. So, some people are sitting back and letting everyone else make the decisions, where after that guy makes the decision and he stands out a little bit, he wants to keep standing out and keep standing out. And that's why he becomes the knowledge silo. And why he gets a group of people that might be a knowledge silo around him a little bit as they're trying to step up there. So that's just, I think that's a leadership stepping up. But then due to a failure moving forward, it's not just a leadership that continues and everybody grows. It's a leadership that stops right there.
If I'm understanding correctly, Amos, you're saying that by an individual stepping up and making decisions, that makes it okay for more people to kind of step back and not make those decisions?
I think so. And I think that the knowledge silo is caused by some people stepping forward and not everybody stepping forward. On a small team, it's really not hard to notice whenever it's just one person that does something all the time. On a bigger team, you get one knowledge silo. There's usually a few people that gather around that knowledge silo and they glean off a little bit, so that it's easier to hide the fact that there's a knowledge silo a little bit.
I think the key point that you made there, Amos, is the fact that it's the rest of the people not having the same willingness and desire to step forward and be the leader. Lee, you were talking a little bit about this, where it's the self-organization thing that happens. And on larger teams, because certain people step up and take the role of being a leader or taking on the tougher jobs, there's less self-organization because there's those other people that are willing to kind of sit back and let those other people take those things on. And there's less pressure for the whole team to get involved and do those things.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how to fix that from a team perspective. And on a small team, I think you probably can fix it a bit because you can directly address the individual's issues and maybe talk about those. But if you've got, there will always be personalities that just don't want to be leaders. They don't necessarily feel comfortable, especially in a large group. And so, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people that are in our industry are introverts, which, by the way, is a very powerful thing. If you've read the a recent book, I'll have to put that in the show notes or something. The book on the power of introverts. I'll have to find it. But the point is that there are a lot of people in our industry who are going to be introverts and aren't going to be willing to step up. And I don't know how you fix that from when we have such a large population of people like that.
It's easier to be anonymous in a large group, and it's more difficult to be anonymous in a small group. But so by having smaller groups of people, there's less anonymity and there's more of a need for the unusual hero to emerge. Not hero, because I know that's a negative term in Agile, but the unusual or the unexpected leader to step forward. Sometimes, yes, it's that people are introverted, but it's also sometimes the fact that there are other extroverts around that never give the introvert the chance to be the leader.
Well, and on a small team, even if you're introverted, all the decisions made on that team feel like they're going to affect you a lot more. So you're also more likely to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, that decision that you're making may not be the greatest, even if you are an introvert. Where on the big team, you either say, it'd probably not affect me anyway because they're in that other knowledge silo, or you assume someone else will step up and take it. And if nobody else is stepping up and saying, hey, that decision isn't good, then you don't want to say anything because you're afraid that you're the only person in the room thinking that and you could be wrong.
Yeah. I want to ask you guys a question about teams being too big. Why do you think a team needs to ever become too big? And maybe that's not a great way to phrase the question, but why? Maybe the better question is, why do we ever let or create teams that are quote unquote too big?
Because not every manager has read the Mythical Man Month and they want their project to move faster.
Okay. That's certainly one reason, but why don't we prevent that from happening?
As developers or as managers?
both, either?
I think that many developers are either too afraid to stand up or haven't been in the situation where they've seen the growing team cause a problem, or they're in the minority. And as managers that haven't necessarily led a lot of software teams or understood that, they feel like if I have to build a house and I just get more builders, I can build 4 walls a lot faster.
Okay, what about building something at the scale of a mobile phone operating system, which I'm certain needs, hundreds maybe of developers?
So why are you certain that it needs hundreds?
Oh, I'm just certain that it has to be 100. I'm just positive, Amos. It has to be.
There's so much work to do, and we need to get it done this year.
Right, and when you're so that's a big system. I also think that you have more defined roles there. Like as far as the software goes, you might actually be able to split it up into good teams for that kind of example. But I don't know that I'm certain that it takes 100 developers to create an operating system for a phone in a year.
Well, here's something that amazes me is the way that Linux evolved and was developed was completely open source initially, right? Or publicly, a lot of public committers. And I mean, there was like no real organization to that sort of a thing. And that was a huge effort. Hundreds of developers contributing. Why don't more people take the model of open source development?
Oh, that's a big question with a lot of implications. Fear of someone else taking your code and moving forward and selling it and putting you out of business. I think is a big one.
But hold on, because I'm not saying that you actually make the software you're creating open source. What I'm saying is that you use an approach of, I will allow people to have some amount of autonomy and decide on what they want to work on and commit to getting that done without schedules and project managers and people managers and cross-functional leaders and that sort of thing.
That takes a tremendous amount of trust in your people. I mean, from a CEO's or a manager of a large group's perspective, I mean, if they don't have any way to make sure that their project is progressing in some way, and in a direction and with the priorities that they want, then they don't feel like they've got a job, and they don't really feel like it. Not necessarily that they need one, but they don't feel like it's going to get done the way that their vision sees it getting done.
Well, and they have to be able to let go of that control. Like, nobody becomes president of the United States because they want to say, hey, let Congress do everything, right? They want to be able to have power a little bit. There's some part of that person that wants to have power. And by giving up that control, they're giving up that sense of power.
Right. That's definitely true. It's a political, I'm sure there's a lot of politics, a lot of power playing politics sort of in there. Lee, you said one of the buzzwords, one of the catchphrases for the podcast, and that's trust. So everyone out there has to take a drink. But I mean,
Pee Wee Herman, the word of the day.
Yeah, it comes back very often to trust. Okay, so managers can't trust. One of the reasons why you said they can't trust is because they don't know that progress is being made. But if we used an agile approach and we're doing regular demos, even at this scale, I kind of take away the excuse that there's no way to show progress, right?
I think if you use a continuous flow model, a Kanban priority queue that people pull from, and things go right out the door, the bigger that it doesn't hurt a big team as near as much. as if you're trying to do fixed scope iterations where this is exactly what we're doing right now. Where if you have that priority queue, then anybody can look at the top of that queue and see what's going on. They can see what's next. And I think that works with the open source model is here's our list of priorities in order. Let's just start tackling them. And then you might get less knowledge silos. You get little teams that form and break out of the big team. And hopefully people move around a lot. But you also have to encourage that movement. Like maybe if you're doing pairing, you can't pair with the same person until you've paired with everybody.
But then, so here's something that if Tice were here, we'll do a little channeling again. If Tice were here, I think there would be some discussion of the fact that some process is necessary. For example, if I want to make sure that I'm not pairing with somebody again, this actually came up, by the way, in my team recently. The suggestion was made, let's use the pairing pyramid. And everybody groaned. I was like, because they didn't feel like the process was necessary to accomplish what they needed to accomplish. And
are you sure it was that, or was it that they wanted to pair with this other guy more than everybody else?
I don't think so. I think they felt like they had a fairly good process anyway, and for switching pairs.
And I think the pyramid sucks. I've had that same problem with the pyramid. The best pair switching that I've had where everybody gets to pair with everybody seems to be that everyone sits down in the morning and every hour you get up and rotate one clockwise or counterclockwise. Right. And then the next time the other person does that in the opposite direction, so that you usually pair with most of the team. You might miss a person or two. And that seems to work pretty well. Now, if you can do that where it's not sitting in a room, like you just say, okay, here's the pairings for the day. And you have some kind of maybe some software that'll just do it. That might not be bad. But it was
software that can do it. That sounds like an Amos solution for everything.
Well, it's less laborious than trying to go out and draw a line on this pyramid and see who I've paired with and who I haven't. Like, let's just rotate one direction or the other.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we were doing at the time that someone suggested the pyramid, and I think that's why people were groaning. My point. Besides going off on a tangent on the pyramid, my point was that for the most part, it's been a struggle throughout my career that this balance between process and team self-organization and project self-organization. And so what John was suggesting is basically the ultimate in self-organizing software, right? From a project standpoint, which is let everybody do whatever they want to do and get things done when they want to get it done. And everybody's working on stuff, so that's going to definitely result in good software. And again, I actually agree with that. I think that's a worthy tack to take. Although I definitely see the fear from a manager's perspective of I don't believe that will accomplish that's not necessarily going to get my software done because I've lost control of that.
But I think that's where that all of us need to learn to be able to take risks. I think the big problem there is that the manager doesn't want to answer to his boss if this crazy idea of just letting people go and give them a list of priorities and just let them get it done and not push them will actually work. They don't want to turn around and say, well, yeah, I know we didn't get this done. Yes, I did let them not do. I just didn't tell them what to do. I just let it go to see what would happen. Nobody wants to have that conversation because of the societal views of what would happen if that was going on. Maybe is that called communist programming? If you do it that way, like everybody just does what they can do in order to get everything done.
Hey, maybe I don't think so though. Let's not call it that.
But I mean, do you see where I'm coming from as a manager? If it doesn't work, it's hard to justify.
Oh, let me tell you something. If you talk to people, I'm talking about sane people.
They're not managers.
Well, they're not you. They are going to absolutely think that you are batshit crazy if you propose something like that. But
it works for so many companies.
Let me say it. Here's the amazing thing. You didn't let me get to the punchline. The amazing thing is it freaking works. How could that possibly be? How could it possibly be that I can cut loose 50 developers on a code base and they could somehow magically self-organize like ants and figure out how to build some kick-ass software?
So I got to tell you guys,
once we feel freedom, we just want to keep it going.
I got to tell you guys about a demonstration that I saw years and years ago when I was doing a lot of research into cognitive psychology and computer AI. And this was a demonstration of self-organization. So imagine an auditorium filled with people, and each person in that auditorium has a big card that has a bright green side and a bright orange side. And in front of them, played on the big monitor or the screen in front of them, large, is a flight simulation. And their task is to take a plane that's in flight and land it. But all they can do is certain parts of the auditorium. Certain parts of the auditorium are assigned to the yaw, or before I screw up one of these terms, the up and down motion of the plane, or the side to side motion of the plane.
Right.
And which way they want to go is they just hold up their card, and then there's a camera that is checking to see which in that area what's the most color it sees, and then it makes the plane go in that direction and in that way that the majority of the people said. And as a group, they actually were able to land this plane. They had to make a second round, but they were able to land this plane. So the first time they didn't quite get it right on, and as a group, they took the plane back up, turned it around the airfield, and took a second shot and landed a plane without anyone being in control of the plane. No pilot.
That's amazing. Is that something that's like on YouTube where we could?
Yeah, can I find this study? I'm already searching for it.
I mean,
I haven't seen the video. This was a video that I had seen back in 2000. So I have no idea if it's still around or how you'd find it.
What would be even more amazing to me is if there was no leader that emerged, that if the people just communicated amongst each other, right? And there were no real leaders, that everybody just sort of figured it out for themselves and was talking to the people within their immediate vicinity. But there wasn't someone like, okay, you guys do this and you guys do that sort of thing, because that to me is having a leader on a team and isn't as much self-organizing as it is somebody directing everyone, right? And I'm guessing, based on how you described this, Lee, that the people all kind of just figured this out.
Oh yeah, there was no talking between them.
They couldn't talk?
They couldn't talk between them. All they could do is lift up their particular card as the direction they think the plane ought to go.
That's amazing. I mean,
I thought so too.
It's amazing to me as well. I mean, I mentioned ants, right? And there's a lot of stuff ants can do. I mean, ants can strip an elephant down to its bone, and they can move tons of leaves and grass.
And individually, they're idiots.
There's no talking, I guess, right? I don't know if ants can talk.
They use pheromones.
Me too.
It's weird because they can take like a dead ant makes a certain smell. It produces a certain chemical, and they can spray a live ant with it. And other ants will pick it up and carry it off to like the ant graveyard where they throw the dead ants, and they'll toss it away. And he'll follow them back, and they'll pick him up again and carry him and throw him back. I've read a lot about ants too. It's very interesting how that all plays out. They're basically a finite state automata that it just follows this path over and over and over and over.
I mean, it just amazes me that that sort of thing can happen without there being some sort of person standing there with the whip in the chair, cracking the whip and telling people do this, do that. I mean, it's amazing what people can accomplish when they're left to self-organize. And the whole reason I asked, why do we have to, why do we allow things to get too big, is to explore this and talk about the places where people are able to do this sort of stuff at a very large scale without getting in the way and allowing egos or whatever it is that motivates these people to try and take things over and inject themselves into them. It was interesting. Nate Mackey had a pick the other on a previous episode, or I think it was Steam, and their employee handbook says that the Valve. Thank you, Amos. Says that the guy that started the company is something like he's more not your boss than anyone else.
Right. Nobody's your boss, and the guy who started the company is more not your boss than anyone.
That's the sort of attitude I think that we need in these big companies, is where everybody says, "Hey, I'm really not your boss. You need to do this yourself." Do you think that there are limitations, that these companies somehow have superhero developers who are just all MIT graduates and rock stars and PhDs and really super type A's, and that's why they succeed? Or do they have normal people working there? Workaday Joes?
I think they have some normal people there. It's amazing what people can do when you empower them to make their own. They take ownership that we always talk about people needing. It's taking ownership. Whenever you're empowered to make your own decisions, that's the only thing you can do is take ownership or get fired.
I think it also has to do with expectations, right? So my wife is a teacher, and she is constantly talking about the fact that her students live up to whatever expectations she sets for them, for the most part, with minor exceptions. So I think the same thing goes with people in general. If you're in a particular situation and there's no particular expectation for you to perform well, or to self-organize, or to manage yourself, then you won't, right? You won't expend the extra energy, and you won't feel like you need to, because no one's expecting it of you. But if you're in a situation or a company like Valve obviously is, that you can they expect you to do that kind of stuff, then I think normal in air quotes people will exceed the expectations that sometimes they even have for themselves.
You said keywords there, Lee, and you beat me to the punch once again. The fast mind of a PhD. Expectations. Expectations, I think, is huge here, because I think there are extremely different expectations between companies that do this big swarm self-organizing thing, and expectations for companies where you have some sort of a hierarchy. Along with these expectations, I think there's also another key word, incentive, right? What's your incentive for this behavior? These companies must incentivize people differently than hierarchical companies, right? I have to imagine that they do. I can't imagine how they would operate otherwise.
So I'm not sure I go along with this one, because I mean, at least for me personally, and that's the only thing I have to go on. So I assume that other developers that are around me have the same thing. For the most part, if I'm working on a project that I like, and I think the software is good, and I enjoy doing that for the sake of doing it. And so you don't really have to incentivize me to work. I would be coding something, even if you weren't paying me. I wouldn't necessarily coding your stuff, if you weren't paying me, but I'd be coding something. And so if you put me in a big room and said, here's all the people you can work with, and here's the great software you get to work on, and we'll pay you regular what everybody else is getting. Go for it. To me, that would be enough incentive for me. I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
The incentive is the freedom. The
freedom I wanted to say that.
Well, that's why I already typed it on the show title suggestions. is that is the incentive? That is what they're giving them as their incentive. I don't know if it still works this way. At one point in GitHub, everyone there made the exact same amount of money. That took it off the table. So you're not incentivizing by money. You're incentivizing with freedom. The ability for you to choose the direction of the software, the direction of the future, and the direction of what you yourself can accomplish.
I think that says it all. And I'm mad at Amos because I wanted to say those things.
I love you, John.
Guys, we could go on for probably another hour on this topic, but we are out of time.
Ooh, and I've got to pee.
Do you guys have any? I could have done without that.
Good title.
Do you guys have any parting words on the topic?
No, I think Amos's closing was perfect.
Yeah, I can't do any better than that.
Oh, thank you.
Let's go to the picks, picks. Amos, what are your picks tonight, man?
Well, I was going to have 3, but as we talked about earlier, having lots and lots of picks gets to be a pain, so I'm going to save one for later.
It gets to be too big.
Well, yeah, exactly. Too many picks.
7 plus or minus 2.
So I'm only I have 2 tonight. One is ScreenFlow, which I know earlier you said that you had thought you'd pick. It's a great utility for doing screen capture or screencasts from the Mac. Very editable, nice interface, simple to use, but yet really powerful. I use it to show things to the team. It's really good communication tool for that. And one day, hopefully, I'll publish some screencasts online and use it for something other than just communicating to my team. And then the other one, I think, goes with tonight, talking about big teams and communicating. There's a Thoughtbot blog post called "Don't Talk to Just Me," and they talk about having communication that is able to be seen, asynchronous communication, but making it so that everybody can see it. So if you have a chat room system where everybody can read what's going on, you don't have private rooms. You have a couple of virtual meeting rooms set up just like you would have a meeting room at your office. And if people want to have a private conversation, not in the main room, they go into those rooms. But those rooms are still available to the public so other people can come in later and read what your conversation was about. Just keeps the communication lines open and makes sure that there's no secret features going in.
Good picks, Amos. I wanted to tell you that ScreenFlow, I'm again jealous because I wanted to use that as a pick and I should have done it sooner, but I actually used this very similarly to, I think, the way you did. I used it to create some information that I wanted to share with my theoretical, hypothetical, very large team and shared it out with them that way so that they could all get a very consistent message around something.
Good tool for that.
All right, I'll go ahead and do my pick. I just have one. I like to do just one pick. My pick is a book. It's actually a book that Lee and I and some other people did a book club on way back when, a long time ago, and it's called Growing Object-Oriented Software Guided by Tests. I didn't write down the authors' names, but it kind of dovetails with some stuff that we talked about in a past episode on Walking Skeleton. So that conversation around Walking Skeleton made me think of this book, so I wanted to make it as my pick tonight. That's my pick. Lee, what do you got?
So I've got 2. One is the one that I mentioned before, which is I found the book. It is Quiet, The Power of Introverts by Susan Cain. So by all means, check that out. It's a great little book about which a lot of us will probably identify with. The other one is really a blog. There's a guy, I'm not sure of his full name. His blog is at MK Young, mkyong.com. And I have to say, in the last year, practically every other time I would do a search on Google for somebody that had come across the particular problem I was hitting, he had the answer. He's a walking Stack Overflow all by himself. So I just wanted to use him as a pick because he's amazing.
So what I heard you say was that his blog is way better than Amos's blog.
Oh, way better.
Yeah,
than
I'm sure it looks prettier.
It's got better words too, I'll bet.
Probably. Mine's usually full of toilet humor.
Of course, we expect nothing but the best. Good picks, Lee. Hey guys, keep the conversation going with us. We want you to come out and join our private community on Google+. It's the This Agile Life private community on Google+. You can interact with us and us and other past hosts of the show. Help us decide on future topics and engage in all of this lighthearted tomfoolery that we are always up to on the show. You can very simply find and join the private community by going to our website, thisagilelife.com, and clicking Join the Community link in the menu bar.
And John listed that if you run into Amos, he'll give you a hug if you join the community.
That's right.
Amos will or John will?
Amos.
Okay.
Amos will give you a hug. And I'm sure he will back that up.
I will.
That's awesome.
My wife was upset that you didn't ask her permission before posting that I would give random people hugs.
What do I need her permission for? It's you giving the hug.
I think she pictures different listeners than I do.
I see. Right. Female listeners.
Yes.
If you're a female listener, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
We would. We'd love to also have guest hosts. So if any of you would like to be on This Agile Life, please let us know.
I'm actually working on a female guest host, Amos, and I'll tell you more about that someday soon. All right, everybody.
To do with retrospective?
No. Oh, yes. Yes and no. But there's 2 female hosts that I'm working on.
Yay!
All right. Why don't we tell everybody where they can find out more about us? Amos, where can folks find out more about you?
You can find me on Twitter and GitHub at Adcron or my ugly blog, Dirty Information, just keeping it dirty.
Lee, where can folks find you on the internet?
I'm at Agile Atheist on Twitter and agileatheist.blogspot.com for my blog.
Very
good.
You
can find us all on our new Google Group community.
That's right. You can find me at my blog, johnsextro.com, and you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at jcsextro. Check out the website once again, thisagilelife.com, to find the show notes and the link to join our private community on Google+. Thanks for listening, and keep living this agile life.
Don't forget to rate us on iTunes.